My name is Eugene Nizker. I am with Agile Vancouver since the beginning, and I will be the moderator today. Changing of jobs is a reality of your life, of our lives, and recruiter is a pretty important player in the game. So chances are many of you already had experience working with recruiters, and this experience may or may not be pleasant. So that's why we wanted to have this panel to give you some important tips from recruiters to improve your chances when it comes to this significant moment of your life. Now a little disclaimer. I'm not a big fan of recruiters. I'm not
like us.
I'm not a big fan of recruiters as a candidate. First of all, because they don't work for me. Well, indeed, do I pay recruiters? No, I don't. Who pays them? Employer. Guess who they work for? Although perfectly logical, that simple thing is very difficult to comprehend and to internalize for us as candidates. They don't work for candidates. Right? Second thing is communication problems. This, infamous "don't call us, we'll call you" attitude that we often see from recruiters. Then chances are they will not submit your resume as is. They will massage it. And by doing this, they may misrepresent you. That happens. Fourth thing, from time to time, recruiters can submit you to a company without your consent, getting you in trouble pretty quickly by doing this. So all this is a reality of the practice, a reality of the field. So selecting a recruiter, we have to be very careful. I'm not a big fan of recruiters as employer as well, because on one hand, they're supposed to give me candidates that only worth my time, and quite often recruiters don't understand what I need and send people who only waste my time. And that's why there is sometimes problems with recruiters that we experience as candidates and employers. Why am I standing here then? Because I worked with, I think, just about every employer in the city in the last 20 years. And I have a handful of those who I am still working with right now. And today we have representatives of two, I would say, the most important agencies on Vancouver market. I'm not the only good ones, but I would suggest that you are, generally speaking, safe in their hands. They have good practices, they have ethical approaches. So Amanda represents Corporate Recruiters. It is a small company, but with a very high reputation in the city, and they work really hard to look after their candidates. Joel represents Annex Consulting, which is probably the biggest in the city. So we have this, spectrum, the small and the big. And I know Stacy Chernyuk, who is the president of Annex Consulting for many, many years. And I know how passionately he works on making good reputation in the city among both consultants and recruiters. And I worked with Amanda for I don't know how many years, and I always felt comfortable on both sides of the fence with Amanda. Now, recruiter is not the only player in the game. Before you see hiring manager, chances are you will need to talk to HR. And Corey represents HR here. HR space, I would say. Well, a little disclaimer, I'm not a big fan of HR.
That's a shocker.
Well, first of all, many of us see HR departments as producers of useless papers and people who run these annual merit reviews. I don't know if anyone here likes annual merit reviews. If you do, there's something wrong with you. Moreover, I am from former Soviet Union, and in former Soviet Union, majority of HR departments were led by KGB retirees. So you can imagine when some 15 years ago I first met Corey, she was VP of HR and I was VP of Tech. Our first interaction was not necessarily mutually pleasant, to put it mildly.
I have stories.
Yes. But Corey managed to pretty quickly turn me around because I saw how she can defend an employee interests, having company interests in mind, thus demonstrating that this is not zero-sum game. So today, about 15 years later, we are still friends, and I do come to Corey from time to time when I need advice. So this is our panel today. Unfortunately, fourth member had to cancel due to family thing. So the schedule today will be like that. We will have three rounds. In the first round, panelists will introduce themselves, introduce the company, and outline one or two topics they want to discuss today. Then in the second round, each one of them will go on with their topic, and we will discuss it for maybe 15 minutes each. And after that, in round 3, we will open the floor for the questions. Any questions so far?
What is your name?
Eugene. Yes. If you need to say something and I don't hear you, don't hesitate to shout. Okay, well, let's start with Amanda.
I don't know what I should add because, I mean, there's some
And
good things and some bad things.
Okay, two tonight.
Okay, I can talk a lot, so I'm probably going to hear that. So my name is Amanda Totoy, as you heard. I work at Corporate Recruiters for the last 13 years. Corporate Recruiters is a tech-focused company. We've been around for 30 years in Vancouver market. We're focused on the Vancouver market. We don't take people outside. We bring people in and we employ the local marketplace, employ the local people. So our focus really is on supporting VC-based companies, VC-based ventures. We're sponsors of Agile Vancouver. We really take quite a big pride in focusing on the VC marketplace. So my background is started originally in South Africa. That's where my accent is from, where I studied in psychology and industrial psychology up to master's level, and got involved into the recruitment area, where I first started in assessment and psychometric evaluations on the executive level. And when I arrived in Vancouver 13 years ago, my focus was on the tech market. Started at Corporate Recruiters at that point in time, and it's been there since. So my focus is software development only. That's all I deal with. That's the only people I talk with, is people part of the SDLC that takes from individual contributor up to director of development, project manager, and everything surrounded from QA testing, etc. Everything surrounding that. So that's kind of my introduction of our company and who I am. And then my topics of discussion is, I thought, to kind of take a different level and to take a different take on working with recruiters, and that is your career planning. What do you do to manage your career? What are your responsibilities? How can you be more effective and efficient in using the tools at your disposal? Recruiters is one tool. How do you make the best use of those recruiters? And how can you be better at that? And along those lines, I am going to address what does your career planning process have in common with the Agile process? We're all here part of Agile. What does it have in common with that? You'll be surprised actually at how many things are. And then how does it align with principles that local tech CEOs are using to build their companies? There are a particular set of principles currently adhered to that may be enlightening to some of you, may be kind of old school for most of you, for others. So that's my topic, is your career plan.
Okay, thank you, Amanda and Joel.
So no big evening for you. First of all, thank you for having us here tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about recruiters. Are we friends? Are we foe? I hope we come away thinking we're more on the friend side than foe side. And hey, we all make mistakes, I realize that, but I think there's a lot of good lessons learned that we can bring to the table tonight. My name is Joel Chavischuk. I'm the Director of Consulting Services with Annex Consulting Group. My background, believe it or not, is 25 years in IT. It's something I'm quite proud to say, but also a little overwhelmed to mention. It's been a very fast 25 years. I graduated from Simon Fraser 25-ish years ago, and through the co-op program. I started my career with a multinational systems integrator where we were pioneers locally in the client-server development space. Back when SQL Windows was a new technology and Oracle was the back end. After 3 years of consulting, I decided I wanted to see more what it was like on the client side, so I spent the next part of my career in different analysis roles, project management roles. But the largest role I had, aside from Annex, was 11 years as manager of IT for a mid-sized crown corporation. Mid-sized being staff-wise, we had about 250 people, but technology-wise, we had about 40 servers and a very large software development platform. It's all progress-based with a move towards Microsoft technologies in the later years. After about 11 years of working in IT, I decided I needed a bit of a change, so I had worked with Annex on, oh boy, probably over 140 projects over the years and got to know Stacy extremely well. He's our founder. Decided that I talked to him about what it would be like maybe to work with Annex. So 3 years ago I made the move and started out as a client manager, responsible for certain accounts and for certain recruiting aspects. But 2 years ago made the move towards Director of Consulting Services, which really means that I oversee all of our recruitment efforts as well as our software development, I guess mostly software development project-based services as well. I guess overall, I'm pretty fortunate to have been recruiting as well as on the hiring side, and I think over my 25-year career, probably hired about 20 people overall and over 200 consultants. So I've seen it both from a recruiting perspective as well as a client side overall. So who is Annex? Who here doesn't know who Annex is, first of all? I'm just curious how many folks we have here. So a few of you. We've been around since 1998, providing IT consulting and staffing services, largely in the contract space. We've had a few permanent opportunities over the years, which have really grown in the last couple of years, so we're doing a lot more perm than we have contract. We'll be actually opening up a new practice focused on permanent staffing in the next week or so. It's becoming that important to us. Our project-based work tends to be in the $500,000 or less category, so more small to medium-sized projects. We're proud to say that we generate more opportunities in the contract side anyway than anybody else in BC. Last year we had 317 projects, and over the years we've grown on average about 60% per year since 1998. Right now we're largely known for having a Vancouver and Victoria presence, but we're also opening up in Calgary and Seattle in the next couple of years. Calgary later this year, then Seattle will be the next large opportunity. We're also intimately knowledgeable in IT. Most of our staff have an IT background, or at least the senior people in our organization. So we get IT, so it's not a matter of just doing the keyword buzzword matches, which I know that some of our competitors are probably guilty of. But above all, I'd like to think that we're known for our integrity and for our ethics. Eugene highlighted a few things already around working with recruiting firms and how it can go sideways pretty quickly. I'll talk a bit about that as part of our main topic as well. But when we talk about ethics, we don't poach from our clients. If we tell you we're going to put you forward to a client, we're going to do so. If you want to know what your rate is, your bill rate is compared to your pay rate, in other words, what margin we're putting on top of your rate, we'll let you know that as well. It's something you should always think about. You may say, well, why do I care if I'm making $70 an hour? That's all I care about. But if that company that you're working with is putting a $30 an hour margin on top of you, that client may not even give you a look because you're way too expensive overall. So think about that. Always ask those questions when you're working with companies to understand really what it is they're doing on your behalf. In terms of topics, the things I want to cover are kind of interrelated. The first thing is really how to differentiate yourself when it's a competitive marketplace. Let me ask you this question. Right now, when you're applying for that dream opportunity, whether it's contract or a permanent situation, who do you think is your main competitor? Anyone? In most cases, it's going to be an internal referral. It's not the other company that we're competing against. It's somebody known to somebody in that organization. So right you're behind the 8 ball. We'll talk a bit about maybe how to differentiate yourself, especially in those 25% of the roles, give or take, that are out there as an open competitive situation. But there's some things you can do that really stand out from everybody else. And the second topic is really around the ongoing relationship. So once you get to know the recruitment firm you're working with, what things do we suggest you do to stay on top of that relationship over the years so that you're always in our mind when an opportunity comes around and we're always thinking about you overall.
Okay, thank you, Joel. You spoke a bit longer and the punishment will be swift.
You didn't.
Yeah, I didn't. You mentioned about mistake scanning. I witnessed one mistake when Alex misrepresented a person and that cost person his job. But as I said, the good company is not the one that doesn't make mistakes, but that's the one that honors them and works on them. The employee of Annex who made this mistake that cost a person a job is not with the company anymore. So that's okay. Thank you, Joel. Corey.
Hello. Is everybody here? Awake? Okay, just checking. So my name's Corey, and I've had the privilege of working with Eugene it took me 2 years to break him though. Remember how he said he hated HR? It took 2 years, just so you know. So it was a fun 2 years, I must say. So I'm not a recruiter. Well, actually, before I tell you what my company does, I'll tell you who I am. So when I was really young, my mother started a placement agency in Fort McMurray in the late 70s when I was going to high school. So when I, in part-time, I started doing recruiting with her when I was really young. So I've been in and around sort of the recruiting world for a long time. I can tell you that once I did that, I really focused more on traditional HR, not traditional HR, but more internal HR versus the recruiting side of things. So I come with a lot of experience when it comes to HR, and just from a techie perspective, years ago, when I first got into working in tech, I thought, well, I better go take a programming course, because if I'm going to hear somebody say that they wrote 1 million lines of code, I need to know what that means. So I actually took a basics course and learned how to write basics.
I didn't know that.
Pretty impressive, eh? So I know enough to know that, holy Hannah, your jobs are not easy. And I really appreciate that. And so I think it's really important that who's ever representing you, whether it's HR or a recruiting firm, that they understand and really get what it is that you do. So what else can I tell you about myself? I don't know. I could talk a lot, but I won't. I'm going to tell you about my company a little bit. So having been doing HR and recruiting, or doing a little bit of recruiting in the beginning, trying all different kinds of roles, I decided I was going to start an HR consulting firm. And so we become the HR department for companies that don't have HR. So we don't do the recruiting. We actually help you integrate within the organization. So we put the infrastructure in place for companies that don't have it. And when employees are getting hired, we help orient them into the organization. So I'm here to keep these guys honest, the recruiting firms over here. And I'm sure they're here to keep me honest. So it's a good balance. So the things I want to talk about today a little bit is just countering anything they say that I don't agree with, first off. And just making sure that when you're out there, one of the things that Eugene said that he doesn't like about recruiters is the thing that drives me the most crazy, is the fact that, you know what, you don't pay the bills. But I know that there's recruiting firms out there that will treat you like you do. And I tell you, for me, depending on where you are in your career, I think it's important to think about the kind of firms that you align yourselves with. And thinking about whether or not you are a number, or are you actually somebody that they're out there actually wanting to help. So I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about that. I want to spend a little bit of time finding out, do you actually need to use recruiters all the time? I think the answer is no, and it's thinking about how you can do it, what else you can do to complement what the recruiters are doing for you. And then just talking about looking at an organization and making sure it's the right fit for you. So talk a little bit about that. Alrighty, how's that, Eugene?
That seems a lot. Okay, that completes our round one. Any questions so far about who the panelists are, about their companies, and about topics? Okay, go ahead, please.
I've got a question for all the recruiters and
Corey.
Corey, and your perspective would be helpful as well. And looking back over the years, probably more than a decade ago now, when Annex came onto the scene, there was a lot of trade. Annex grew its trade on paid referrals for consultants. So I remember my inbox being flooded with people who wanted to refer me, but I'd never heard of it before. And so my question for all the recruiters tonight is, what is the current accepted practice and ethics around referral fees? For example, does Annex still use referral fees as a business mechanism? Do the other consultants companies do that as well? And are there any concerns that consultants and contractors on our side of the fence should have that?
Sure, I'll start off with that one. Yes, we still pay referral fees. In fact, our highest earner is somewhere over $100,000 now. Do you mind if I talk a bit about this? I know it's a bit of a shtick.
Sure, yes.
Yeah.
So it is a differentiator for us. Only one person can be a referrer for an individual. So in our system, if Vlad here is in our system and you refer him, every time he's on a contract assignment with us, you get $1 per hour for every hour he works into perpetuity. So if the average contract is, say, 18 months long, that could be $3,000 in your pocket. The next one might be 18 months, that's another $3,000. Every project we refer to us would be $2 per person if we place those individuals. So in a perfect world, you may get $3 an hour if you refer both the project as well as the individual. We take it really seriously. Yes, there can be some ethical considerations for some clients who can't accept gifts. In that case, we could take that amount off of the invoice. We could donate it to a special organization, a non-profit organization as well. But it's something that we do and we pay a lot of attention to. It's one of our core values that we treat very seriously.
So I take it you have a contract on that basis. It's not just an ad hoc arrangement.
Well, it's not. I would have to admit, it's more of a handshake in that, if you're familiar with that individual who you referred and they're working through us, you should know that, or I hope that you know that, and you're seeing that check every month or so. I'm not aware of us missing on any situations like that. The odd time somebody may say, hey, I thought I referred Vlad, but it was actually you. Only one person can be the referrer, so if that second person misunderstood that, probably misunderstanding overall, but every month, yeah, we do pay out a substantial amount of money in referral fees.
I was on the receiving side of it, so I know.
From corporate recruiters' point of view, we do permanent placements, probably 99.9%. I don't do contract, so we do not pay referral fees because most of the folks that we place over the years. I get to know them. It's very much a relationship building process. People get referred to us all the time because of our brand and integrity and all the principles that we adhere to. So keeping track of all the different people that refer them for different periods of their career will be really hard to track. So as a principle and as a policy, we do not pay referral fees. We are dealing with candidates directly, getting to know them, their career path, and then working with them on finding the right opportunities. So we don't.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding? Okay.
So my question is, my second question is a bit of an update. 10, 15 years hence, right now, the IT industry in Vancouver is quite substantial, and it's healthier than it's been in years past. And there's also significant action in the startup front, the funded project, company, brand, arena. So I'm wondering how your companies, and including Corey, your company, who integrate people into organizations. How do you differentiate between the solid company with the big stuff and the product line and everything else versus the startups and financing, which can be pretty risky for people on our side of the fence?
Sure, but we share that risk with you, because our focus area is very much that small to medium-sized company. We excel in building teams. That's what our logo says, is we build better tech companies. So we typically do not work with the multinationals, the big, crown corporations. Our company is built on small to medium-sized companies, but we share the risk with you. So we will share that there's VC involvement of X amount of money, what the burn rate is, what the CEO track record is, have they had successes and successful exits before, and you as a candidate, and that's why my focus is on the career planning and your responsibility, because in the end, your career remains your responsibility. I'm just one plug in that whole planning process. So it's transparent, it's open, it's a sharing of all the information that I have access to. Obviously, it's not a public company, so I don't have access to all their financials. But as far as I know, and then we enter into that risk together. Because keep in mind that as a permanent placement, I have a 1-year guarantee. So most of the companies that we work with will be vetted by us. So that's why many candidates, when they're looking for that small to medium-sized startup, they come to our website because the companies we present are usually vetted. They at least can pay my bill. They can at least, have a burn rate of at least a year, so that I'm covered. So that's it. I think the sharing and the participating in that risk is where we kind of offset that situation.
Let me add, kind of clarify how this 1-year guarantee works. If I, as an employer, hired a candidate from a recruiter and something didn't work out, either he left or he had to let go, then the money, and it's significant money, is returned.
Yeah.
One thing that I'd like to say is that I think it's really important, burn rate and all of that's great, I think that's an important piece to know. But the other thing I think that's equally as important is how have they invested in their HR? So we work with startups. We have startup IT companies that will come to us and say, you know what, we want to set up an organization. We want to make sure we're really clear what our culture is. We want to put in all the right tools so that when you come and work for us, you know exactly what it is we're doing and why and how you're going to make an impact in that. So I want to know, if I were you, not only do they have the burn rate, do they have the coin, but actually have they invested in you as an employee? Because they can invest in HR before they hire you, even if you're the first one. And I think that's a really important thing to know about, because how they treat you once you're in, whether they got the money or not, it's how is it going to, what's the environment going to be like? So I would want to know what HR stuff they have in place.
That's very valid.
One thing I'll add to it, even though we're known mostly for working with larger crown corporations and the top 100 in BC, you're quite correct. There is a definite growing trend towards startups, and we do screen our clients pretty carefully, and we won't work with just every organization. I'm only aware of one situation where the client actually couldn't afford to pay us, but we still were good on that with our consultant. This is more for the contract side of things. In a permanent role, I would say that you're probably in a better place to speak to that. We haven't placed too many people in smaller startups, but...
And the integration can be a challenge for sure. That's why we value people like Corey, and many of our startups, we actually refer HR consultants to them as a permanent or contract hire to put this method and the methodology in place and the process in place to ensure the longevity of our placements. Not all CEOs have the capacity for that. They may not have the budget for that, but then we at least try to make something work, because the integration is really important, and it's a lose-lose if that's not in place. So very valid point there by Corey, for sure.
I think it's also a measuring stick, one of many that is on whether an organization is going to be successful or not. It's not the, obviously, it's one of many, but I think it's an important yardstick, especially for you as an employee.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick question. I'm fairly new to Vancouver, and to Canada in general, so I'm not quite sure if this is an appropriate question. But I was just wondering, as recruiters, do you consider the visa status, like say a work permit versus a newcomer versus in recruiting and using that person?
From our perspective, we work with what our clients require. So because we do permanent placements, mostly our candidates will have at least visa legal status for at least 2 years. And we will again share that with our client. It may in some instances prevent permanent placement plus permanent hiring because of the risk involved. They want every company hiring a permanent hire because of the money involved and the upfront and the cost involved in the integration. They want at least 2 years payback from a candidate. They want you to work there for 2 years. So the risk flight is just too high if there's no permanent residency. So typically we have to require that. And then some of our companies will have provincial nominee programs in place where they have that initial work permit or visa, and they'll have something in place to turn it into a permanent residency program.
I have to say, as an employer, I have recently 2 cases, and I have some legal obligations to fulfill, right?
Yes.
So I cannot employ a person a day after his visa expired, right?
Yeah.
Canada is usually good extending visas, but I had 2 cases when I had to part with people because they came back, they wanted to go back to Europe. Well, it's always a pain to replace an employee, and that's why every employer is interested in a longer-term relationship.
Just a couple things. It's a barrier. It's not one you can't overcome, but I think it's a barrier. If there were 2 equal candidates, one that had permanent residency and you didn't have to worry about any paperwork, you didn't have to worry about whether it would be renewed or not, and they had exactly the same skills, I'm going to guess they would choose the one that didn't have any complication with it. So know that it's a barrier, but it's overcomable. New word. Whoops. It can be overcome. The other thing, though, is thinking about, to your point, is that if you're being hired through a recruiting firm, there's a big investment that the firm has made going through a recruiter. So if you've got an obstacle like that, you might want to find other avenues, and maybe a recruiter is one of your research options or one way that you look for a job, but maybe you need to be more creative in other ways. So an employer might be more willing, or not an HR company, but HR might be more willing to invest in you if they haven't invested in a big placement fee to get you in there permanently. So it's balancing both those things. But it is definitely something it's a barrier for sure.
So of course on the contract side, it's less of a concern. We've had people here on a 3-month holiday, and we placed them on a contract for 2 months because they needed something to fund their weekends at Whistler and wherever else they were going. So it's a little bit easier on the contract side for sure.
Okay, so...
I have a question. I just think it's a question I want to make sure gets answered because I think you should know it. You said something. You said that it was really important that they understand the rate, that the markup rate from your hourly rate to what the pay rate is. I think it would be helpful for you guys to know what then is what's a good average that they should be looking at. Because I think that's really important. Whoever's representing you want to know how they're representing you. So would you recommend?
Absolutely. I think as a rule of thumb, 20% seems to be a happy medium. For more expensive roles, the senior BA roles, project managers, management consultants, it might be a little bit less, at least in my opinion it should be, because those folks tend to be lower maintenance than, say, somebody right out of high school or university who's doing maybe help desk support. So in general, I would say 20% when you're looking at the $70 to $80 an hour range. For lower price roles, it might be a bit higher because there's a higher risk we find anyway with, say, that junior help desk technician. Some companies apply a much bigger margin to more expensive people. I just think it's wrong because are you really doing enough to justify a $30 or $40 an hour margin when your client's being billed $150 an hour? It seems a little excessive to me personally.
Okay, let's conclude our round 1 and move to round 2. So, Amanda, your topic, you speak, and then maybe.
Sure. And I think we've addressed some of those things, and I just want to say, career planning is ultimately your responsibility. You're the owner of your career. You manage it, and you need to make the decisions on who to use, who to work with, and how to work with those folks. So times have changed. Most of us in this room, we're working with technology. You have to plan your own career pretty much as a series of sprints, just the same as you do in your product development environment, with multiple releases at any given time because of changing roles, changing jobs, changing companies. Technology that was valid 15 years ago currently is not used. How did you stay up to date on those? We grew up with people staying in the same job for their entire career. That's just not valid anymore. It's not even thinkable. So you as a candidate will need to take regular retrospectives to determine if you're still on course, what can you do better with increased velocity to adjust to the market requirements that keep changing on us. So, and one of this would be to work with a recruiter that you trust, that's got a kind of finger on the pulse of the technology market, know what's in need, when is it in need, what's the demand currently, what companies are hiring, what not, and that sharing of information. So, and then it's your own personal life goal requirements. You know, when you're single, you have certain requirements. When you're married and kids and, you know, want to work from home-based office, it's different. And just, you know, using the information once again to share with the recruiters so that they know what's important to you. Do you need 4 weeks vacation because of, you know, a spousal agreement or whatever the thing may be? We need to know those things. And then, you know, a recruiter should almost see as your scrum master, because we are the person that deals with the client all the time. We understand the customer requirements. We share that with you. We share that in huddles. We give the feedback. We close the loop with you. Well, it's you know, most of it, that's what we need to do, is make sure that every candidate gets the feedback, gets constructive feedback, and stay in the loop. And you know, if we have to look from your career goals and your life goals and the skills requirements, and then we go into the career goals. In the development, there are 3 tracks really, if you look at all of us starting as a programmer. You're really either an expert individual contributor, or you're a leader manager, or you're a founder startup guy. So it's one of those 3 typically in the permanent roles. Each of them require a different career strategy. So if you're talking about whether you're an individual contributor, you're the type of person that gets up thinking about technology and goes to sleep thinking about technology, how to solve problems with a technology basis. You will spend money, time, and effort on upgrading your tech skills. You will make sure that you know exactly what the newest language out there is, the newest technology, how it's applied, what's the methodology surrounding it, etc. Typically, those folks will grow from a programmer, they go into a tech lead maybe, they go into an architect, and they eventually will end up as a CTO of an R&D company. Tech gets them going. If you're more from the leadership management, and that's for you important, the people relationship side to it, you will typically from a programmer go up into a tech lead, project lead, or dev lead, go up to a dev manager, and eventually as a VP engineering or VP development. People, processes, methodology gets you going, not necessarily the technology, because you can hire architects and they will report to you. And then the third is that founder startup, which we currently see and have always seen in Vancouver quite a lot with more or less success. So as the founder and technology startup, you will typically network with VCs. Where does the money come from? What's the cost of that money? What do you give up for that money? And you will invest in your business sense and your business savvy. And typically, those folks will, from a programmer, will maybe go into a business analyst role, or maybe a product manager, where they have that product ownership, and then eventually start up their own careers, or their own companies. Many young folk these days, with our university programs, they start this very early without necessarily getting that business experience and understanding. But then they typically will get some, you know, advisors, etc. Vancouver is well known there for the support infrastructure that they have for the founders. So you really need to decide which of the 3 are you. What gets you going? What's your passion? What do you want to do when you grow up? What gets you up in the morning, really? And then plan your career accordingly. Because if you don't plan it, you're going to fall around and you're not going to know what's going on at any given time. And no recruiter would be able to consistently and gradually, you know, with some reasoning, represent you into the marketplace. So I think that many people and folks miss this part of it, is that responsibility of planning. And then if we look at how this aligns with our local CEOs and the principles that they are using to build their companies, I don't know how many of you have read the Rockefeller Habits of Vern Harnish. Anybody? One in the back. Two. Good stuff. So Rockefeller Habits is something that if you haven't read, you better read it. Or I would suggest that you read it. That's my suggestion. Because it's a well-read book. ASTEC is one of our associations here locally that gets together CEOs on a regular basis, and they are working through the entire Rockefeller Habits. That's the strategies that they implement. That's the way that they think. That's the way that they are managing it. We are sponsors of ASTEC. We get access to those sessions. And I would suggest that if you want to talk the talk of the CEO, because in the small companies that I sometimes represent, CEOs interview you as well. So you need to talk their talk. So that's one of the things that I would suggest you read. So the bottom line really is for me is careers happen to most of us, while it should be something that you plan. Like your investments, your education, your fitness program, we all plan. Why don't you plan your career? Your career is a multi-million-dollar product that needs to be planned accordingly. If you really think of, irrespective of where you are in your career cycle, over the years, most of us will earn multi-million dollars. Why don't you spend time and effort in really planning it out? Whether you start a little late, that's okay, but just do it. And then, figuring out what the market wants, what will it pay for? Because the market, every market is different. Vancouver market may be a little bit more focused on the early stage companies. We do have large conglomerates here for sure, but there's definitely a premium to be paid of it. All the, Facebook coming in, Twitter coming in, all them competing for the same subset of skills at the moment. What do you do to manage your career, and how do you make yourself marketable? And for our techies, I think one thing that I think that Corey will talk to as well, and Joel, is the messaging of your value. I think most of our techies forget how important it is to message your value effectively. Because we're so focused on our technology, and do you have C++ on your, do I have that on my keyword search, or do I? We don't care. It's about the value. What do you bring to the table? Problem solving, because I don't do entry level. So those things that's on your resume really doesn't matter. I'm interested in what problems did you solve? What achievements did you have over the last year or two? What did you help in building value for your company? So messaging your value is extremely important, and it's the soft skills that become more and more important in the hiring decision. With Agile being so prominent in the software development industry at the moment, communication is key. There's no way, there's no need anymore for that back-roomed coder that just, do the coding. Everybody's involved. Everybody participates in the design review, design discussions. Everybody participates, the QA, the testing, everybody's involved. So if your soft skills are lacking, brush up on it, because it will make the difference between whether you get that promotion, whether it's internal, or whether you get that new position. It is absolutely key. Go to Toastmasters, go to whatever you need to do. Limit yourself from speaking your own mother tongue to friends and to colleagues. Because I have come across many a company in Richmond where in the past they've hired so many of people from a particular culture that they just speak that language internally. That's of no value to in your career progress. So do make sure that you practice your English, your business English skills, and then your soft skills overall. So, as good as your planning can be, that really only gives you an ideal. It's something that you need to keep in sight. It's something to test and adjust accordingly. It will always be something that you need to adjust to the realities of the market. It gives you something to start out. And when is it the best to do this? When you're employed. It's best to do at a time when you're not on the market, when you're not looking, you're not driven by money worries, or a company that's in free fall, or because you hate your boss. It's the best time to plan your career is when you're employed and then you start sharing with your trusted recruiter what your needs are, where you're going with your career, and how they can help you get there. So choose the recruiter based on your identified goals. I do believe that a recruiter is not the solution for every problem. I would suggest to many of my companies when they hire, you don't need me for this particular hire because those folks are available, do this and this and this, advertise on these boards, etc. We are not the solve, we're not the solution for everything. So, and the same way is there's not a recruiter that's one size fits all. You need to select a recruiter based on what you want to do with your career. If the fastest route for your career is a particular company, you've identified one company within Vancouver that really does the things that you want to do, make sure that you network with their internal recruiter, with their internal HR, make sure that they know. And again, your value messaging, make sure that you address the needs that they have currently going on. So that's the one. And then, if you're interested in a contract, people like Annex is definitely your better solution than people like me. Don't waste your time with networking with people like myself. And find a recruiter that fits your goals, are represented within both the location and tech environment. I very often, if people say, I want a job in Silicon Valley, I can't help them. I'm not well represented there. So go after a recruiter that fits your needs and then also fits your personal style. If you're uncomfortable with the recruiter and the way that they share their information, go to someone else. Make sure that you test your recruiter. Make sure that you read up on them. Who recommends them? Have they worked with somebody in your network? The same way that you test your development tools, test your recruiter and make sure that you are represented by the best in the industry. And then, the last one is be selective. Be prepared to test, trust, and share. And that way you empower your recruiter to help you land your dream job.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. A couple of comments. Regarding Rockefeller habits, if you don't have time to read the entire book, go on the internet. There is one page rundown. Read it. Read it, you're going to use it. Believe me. Another thing, regarding these 3 tracks of our careers, it's obvious that if you are running your own company, then business sense and business side of things is the focal point of your activity. But in the first and the second tracks, that's now more and more the case as well. It's more and more every time I'm doing technical task, I have to ask myself why I'm solving this problem. What problem I'm trying to solve? Why I'm doing it anyway? Remember this difference between doing the right things and doing things right? So no matter if we are programmers, we need to do this. And we need to speak up to the higher ranks because managers sometimes have a focused view, and if they see or hear a different opinion, they will think. And you will improve your value by doing this. So business sense, business view is as important as technical one. Questions? Go ahead.
My question is with regards to the soft skills. So you may have excellent soft skills, but my question, and Corey, maybe you can address it as well, is how do you differentiate yourself from all these other applicants who claim that they have excellent soft skills when the majority of the time you're trying to market yourself online without actually being given the chance to meet somebody, right? You've got your LinkedIn page, you've got your resume. How do you differentiate yourself to show that you have really, really good soft skills?
Okay, the question is how do you differentiate yourself? How do you market your soft skills, correct?
I think this comes back to me, the way that you message your value. There is a way to message your value through your resume, through your LinkedIn profile. That will get the attention of folks like myself, and I will have a conversation with you. I do not get any emails, resumes, applicants applying. Most of the folks that we place will not be applicants per se. It will be people that I know for several years. I will talk to each and every one of them, so you will be able to sell me on your communication skills. On the technology side, it's fairly easy to do that, and so that's as much as I can say.
Well, a couple things I would just say is, don't take any advice from somebody that says you have to have a resume look a certain way. Because I think that's just not, I would say something else. BS, that would be BS. And here's why, I think that a resume is our calling card, it's our first impression. And so I think it's important that it showcases who you are. And I remember, I often remember when you get a bunch of resumes in, I pay attention to the ones that have done something to set themselves apart. So some people use pretty colored paper. I'm not saying you should use pretty colored paper, but it's whatever it is that represents you. So I think that's important. I think that LinkedIn, making sure again your resume is a reflection of who you are, so write it in the way that is you. Because if it's the right job for you, if it's the right fit, your resume will speak to them. You want to make sure though that you're not connecting with recruiters who are only looking at the keyword searches. So you want to make sure that they are looking at who you are as a whole. Because if they're just looking at you as a number or the keyword, then they're not going to fit you. They're not going to necessarily put you in the right space. And think creatively. If you are different and you stand out in some way, what is that? And then make sure that everybody knows what that is. I think part of that too is getting really clear. One of the things as an HR person is you guys see way more resumes than me, but as an HR person, I'll see someone will call me and say, can you help me? And I'll say, okay, what are you looking for? Well, I could do this, or I could do this, or I could do that. I can't help you. Tell me that you want to go paint a post yellow, and I will find you a post to paint yellow. But if you're not really clear what you're looking for, it's really hard for recruiters to place you. It's really hard for remote to replace you, to find you a role, because if you might do this or might do that, it's more difficult. So the more clear you can get, part of that's about planning your career. Plan it, don't have it plan you.
One thing I'll add as well to that is, yes, social media is probably the #1 way to get recognized these days. But if the recruitment company you're working with doesn't even want to talk to you in person, maybe raise a question, hey, don't you want to meet with me first before you put me forward to this opportunity? Even short-term contracts, often our clients are going to scrutinize those candidates, and if we don't know who we're putting forward, boy, that's a real trigger that maybe those great soft skills that you have in your resume don't translate so well in person. So always ask those questions and maybe demand an interview if you feel like you have that as a gift that your competitors don't.
Or move on to another recruiter.
Do both of your recruiting companies meet with the individuals? Like, I mean, Annex does, right?
We do. I'm going to talk a bit about that as well, because there are some situations where it's not viable, but we always try to meet with people before we come.
Let's move on to the next question.
Just talking about LinkedIn, I mean, can you give us a quick idea, how do you search LinkedIn? Is it the same as you do with the resume, or a little different? Just quickly so we can adapt it to the
Because we're in the tech market and I do software development, I always start out at the technology. So I've got a database of 30,000 plus individuals that I already network with. So not very often I find people on LinkedIn that I don't have a previous experience with, but of course, there's always people coming in. So I always start with technology. Very few hiring managers are as advanced as Eugene that will hire on potential and basic aptitude and not necessarily the particular technology. Most of my hiring managers, when they want somebody on a lab stack with, BGC, etc., that's what they want, and those are the companies that I will then target. So I will go about the technologies, the keyword search, more from a company perspective, companies that are currently doing what my client wants them to do. So very much coordinating with what Corey says. It's not necessarily the things I can do, the technology, but the result of those things. What's the end result? The company builds B2C CRM systems, or whatever the case may be. And that will be my target. I will go through I know the Vancouver market well enough to know who the players in that market are, and I will go from that perspective, look at who their people are that they employ, and then go after those people.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. There was a question here, yes?
Yeah, so I'm a bit naive to this relationship between candidates and recruiters, and I was wondering, how does one go about even finding a recruiter? How do I even network with a recruiter? I mean, this is not a paradigm that was even taught to us, and I graduated in 2010 from QVC. So when did this change that like we're no longer applying to jobs but actually finding recruiters to find
Well, you
jobs?
can
You
still
can still
apply.
apply. You can still apply. There are
Okay.
still companies that do direct postings everywhere.
And this is actually one of the interesting tasks that a candidate needs to decide. Here's a job that I think I can fit and I like to do it. Do I apply directly or do I apply through a recruiter? Or I don't see jobs in particular that I can, or there are too many, so do I need an advisor in a recruiter, how a recruiter can help, or I better off applying directly? That's a question.
Yeah, it's just that there's a bit of a tension between what you describe as the recruiter's advocacy for the company and then what you're describing, Amanda, as the candidate searching for a recruiter and networking with them and creating a
That's why
relationship.
we have who we have here. Because there are probably, I don't know, gazillion of recruiters in town. And again, I worked with many of them. There are handfuls that I still work with.
You know, at certain stages of your career, you have different requirements. And this is again the career planning where it comes to mind, where it's so close to my heart. Is if you graduate in 2010, your early stage in your career relatively, you've got 3 to 4 years experience. You still have a particular, tech-focused viewpoint of your next job. Many of my companies where they need junior to intermediate engineers, I will direct them to the job boards because I don't think I am their, they shouldn't spend their recruitment dollars on that level of position. I would rather tell them, hire me to hire the team lead or the dev manager or the project lead, and that person comes with a Rolodex that they can potentially hire as part of the team. So it's much more bang for your buck. For me to put in a position or a person that they can probably get on Craigslist that is an applicant, there's nothing wrong with that. Please continue to use the job boards. And that's why I was saying recruiter is but one tool and that you should maximize. And it becomes a little bit more prevalent, the value of it, as you grow in your career and where your career plan becomes more vivid in your own mind and that you want to manage according to, you want to have certain positions, certain companies, etc.
But just
early stages.
on a very basic level, how do I find a recruiter? Do I go on
This type of thing. Go to networking.
Simply hard.
Yeah.
Okay,
This
the
is
last
what you do.
question, the last question for the first topic,
Me
there was a
here.
question from this side.
Gentlemen, he has it.
Oh, you did.
Okay, so you,
Well, I was interested in your comment there because it's really important, whether you're looking for a full-time job or a contract, to really understand what the recruiter's role is and where they're coming from. Because, you can go out there and apply to every job on Craigslist and talk to 20 employers. But if you're going to go with a recruiter, don't go to 3 recruiters after the same job. That's, I think,
well, that's for sure.
I think
Because all 3 of them will submit you to the same company and you are really in trouble.
it's really important to
Disqualified.
understand.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's like a house that's been on the market for 6 years. You just don't get sold.
Yeah.
Nobody's interested in you. So you've got to, again, and that's again the main focus. The onus is on you. You're responsible for your career, not me. I'm just one tool that you could use if you wanted to, if we kind of gel.
And
But if
don't
that doesn't
forget-
gel for you, use another tool.
In many cases, our clients don't go beyond the recruiters. We're on pre-qualified vendor lists along with others. So your only option is to go with a recruitment firm because they only work with those 4 or 5 companies and that's it.
In the
Yeah,
contract
we
field,
have to
you're
always
bust if
remember-
you don't.
We have to always remember that Vancouver is a small city. So not too many mistakes will be
That's
allowed.
very true.
True.
Okay,
Our integrity and our brand is our most
sorry, okay, let's go to the second topic. Joel.
Right, so how do you differentiate? Actually, that was great. There's a lot of points that you covered that I was going to touch on. My first one was how to differentiate yourself when applying for a role. The good news is, first of all, how many software developers do we have here in the audience? So probably at least half. The good news is you don't really have to right now. The software development market is hot right now. As of right now, it is by far the most, we see more opportunities in this area than anything else. This and quality assurance right now seem to be the hot tickets. But if you wind the clock back 2 years ago, that wasn't the case. Software developers, for the most part, were in abundance, and there were fewer opportunities overall. And back in those days, it was more business analysis that we were looking at as the hottest skill set. So go back 2 years, how do you differentiate yourself? As I mentioned earlier, most roles are filled by some kind of internal networking that goes on. Obviously, the number one thing you can do is get out there. Who doesn't have a LinkedIn account right now? Anyone? Oh, shame on you.
Get one.
You may think, oh, why would I do that? You know, a LinkedIn account is another social media tool. I've got Facebook. It's more about the connections you make that are maybe 2 degrees of separation away from you. And if you're interested in a search,
who updated your LinkedIn account in the last 4 weeks?
That's awesome to see.
Sorry.
LinkedIn is the number one tool we're using right now as an organization. I'm sure that we're not unique that way. Our database of 20, 30,000 people is becoming less and less important because of the number of very unusual roles we're getting right now from our clients. We'll cover that in a second. So the number one thing is to network a lot. Become that person that becomes the top of the resume pile if you're not that individual who's got that direct connection. So how do you do that? Well, one thing we always say in our organization is that everybody's a salesperson. I would argue that you're in that same boat as all of our staff. You've got to find a way to sell yourself and sell the message that you want to send, whether it's a contract position or a permanent position. And how do you do that? Well, the first thing is, and this is maybe going to argue with me, your resume has about 10 seconds to make a good impression on somebody. If you don't grab that person's attention in 10 seconds, in other words, don't make a mistake in those first 10 seconds that will put you to the bottom of the pile or tossed away, then you're in trouble. So it's things that may seem like common sense, but we see over and over again as mistakes made by software developers. A lot of the more technical roles tend to have, I'd say, the more poor resumes. I know you said that you want a better approach to resumes, but what I'll talk about here are some best practices, at least from our perspective. The first one is a 2-page myth. A lot of people we talk to have really poorly written 2-page resumes that really say nothing, and when we argue that, well, why did you put everything in 2 pages? I was told that's the best practice. Well, if you've got 20 years experience, you've got a really good story to tell. We've never ever had a client come back and say, this 4-page resume is too long. Unless in an RFP they suggest it's got to be 2 pages or less. So don't feel compelled to put a really good story in 2 pages. Also, if you've only got 1 year of experience, don't draw it out to 2 pages because your experience at the quickie mark probably won't impress too many people. So it's really about being appropriate in the length of discussion. I'm not sure what's happened in the last 20 years, but the art of a cover letter seems to have been lost overall. I would say in the roles that we look at, maybe 10% of the applicants have a reasonable cover letter, if a cover letter at all. Why not, if you care about that opportunity you're applying for, take the time to describe why you're the best candidate possible for that role. Grab the attention of the recruiter. In this case, I'm talking about it from our recruitment perspective. A good cover letter makes a big difference, as does a well-written resume that maybe is customized towards a given opportunity. So even though you've got your generic resume, if you love that role that you see on the website and you're wanting to apply for it, spend a few minutes, okay, maybe a couple of hours, rewriting the resume, because we all know these things aren't easy to do. And so that when you submit your resume, you've drawn the attention of that person that you're trying to impress. Unless you've got that really strong relationship, we don't know who you are necessarily, so it's important to do that as a first step towards being recognized. If you're using an objectives statement, and we do see that quite often in resumes, my objective is to do this. Avoid saying nothing. How often, and I'll ask you guys this, do you see things? These are actually 2 different objective statements. I'll read just one. That say nothing. The first one is, to contribute to my company's success through continuously striving to meet the demands of a challenging role, learning and growing as a professional, and earning respect and appreciation of both clients and coworkers. And while we're at it, maybe solve world peace and do some other really great things. It doesn't really say what you're after or who you're all about. Something more concise like, to secure a role as a lead .NET developer, allowing me to showcase my 10+ years of Microsoft development tool experience. Maybe some fluffy stuff around that as well, so it kind of pops. But you know, you're being clear what you're after here versus trying to solve world peace and be a jack of all trades and do it all. That first one's not going to draw our attention, and probably won't draw attention of any recruitment firms or staffing agencies out there.
Or HR.
Or HR. Something you touched on, which I love. Refer to outcomes and accomplishments. Quite often we'll see resumes that talk to, I'm a .NET developer and here are the tools I used. Okay, was that a workgroup solution? Was it a large enterprise application? I don't know. Two guys have 10 years of experience that look the same, but really, what have you accomplished? Talk about the team size, project size, stuff that will pop a little bit more and give that recruiter an easier chance to say, ah, he's the guy that looks like he's got all the stuff that we're looking for here. It really, I think, is common sense, but it seems to be lost over the years. Avoid using acronyms that mean nothing except to the company that you worked at. If you said you developed a CMS, is it a content management system? Is it a client management system? Or is it a case management system? I don't know. You know, it could be any of those three things depending upon the organization you worked at. So don't assume that we know what a CMS is. I know, guys, it's a common sense thing, but make it easy on us on this end. I'm going to talk a bit about managing relationship with the recruiter. At first, I want to give you a brief overview of what's happening with our clients right now. Our clients in general we have a speed to market issue. Even though, this is pertaining more to the pre-qualified vendor list that I mentioned a few minutes ago, they'll give us 2 days to react to an opportunity they put out there, because 2 days we can find a great person. When it's competitive, we've got 20 minutes to find that great candidate, because our competitors are going to be calling that same set of people who you're contacting day in and day out first. You're the first people we think of, because you're looking for work, you're great at what you do. We've got 20 minutes, and our recruitment team is programmed to respond quickly, 20 minutes or less to call 4 or 5 people. Half an hour is often too late. So where mistakes get made, I think, in this industry in general, is that we're so quick to react, we may not find the best possible candidate immediately. And it goes back to what you said about relationships. Even in the consulting, contract engagements, forming that relationship with 2 or 3 trusted firms makes a big, big difference. If we've got that great opportunity, and we're thinking of you, Vlad, because you've been talking to us, and we know what you're all about, we're going to give you that call first, versus the guy who may have met 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 6 months ago, who's not really in our mind. Maintain that relationship. Pick up the phone, even if you're on an assignment someplace and you're thinking about moving on, or your contract's up in a couple of months. We'll do our best to contact you as well. We've got certain people who we call core or primary in our group that we want to stay in touch with. But pick up the phone, and be proactive on that as well. It does make a difference when it comes to these roles. Our clients are picky, more so than ever. I mentioned earlier that LinkedIn's becoming our #1 tool. It's unusual now how many clients will say, even for a contract opportunity, it's got to be lab stack and it's got to be NoSQL in the back end and this. Well, that doesn't make any sense. How could they want all these different things? They're not going to acquiesce on any one of those key technologies. So we're deep diving into all kinds of resumes who we normally wouldn't take a look at, because our clients are, even on short-term contracts, demanding perfection. That's a real change, I'd say, in the past 24 months, where our database used to be the #1 tool. It's still a viable tool, but LinkedIn is easily the #1 thing. So keeping your profile up to date with some of those keywords will make a difference. And once you get past that first level of scrutiny on being assessed, then you can come in for an interview or have a more engaging conversation where we get to know you a little bit more and see those soft skills. Okay. Last thing is our clients trust us. This is huge. We can't put forward somebody who we're maybe a bit wishy-washy on. So come in for an interview, and I'd say that in general for any recruitment firms. Make sure that you've really demonstrated who you are, because when we're putting you forward, we trust that you are who you say you are, and it means having that long-term relationship. Can I tell a really quick story here? This is one client. Worked very, very close to us. I walked a candidate across the street. It was a client who I knew quite well, and I had basically a coffee chat with the individual, the hiring manager. It was for a SharePoint role that they were thinking about hiring for. While I was walking across the street, this candidate talked about how he liked doing help desk, and how he wanted to be a developer, and how project management was really interesting to him. I was almost terrified bringing forward for that even coffee discussion, because he would come across as somebody who was all over the map. I want to make sure that we're putting forward, and I believe all recruiters have the best intentions at heart, is that ideal candidate, and it's not easy in today's day and age. So instill a confidence in us by doing all these things, and come and talk to us.
Okay, thank you, Joel. Questions for Joel?
Just on that consulting role and as a contract, do you find in terms of there much encouragement to incorporate or as on your end?
Excuse me, make sure everyone hears you.
Can you incorporate yourself as a business? Is that beneficial at all in terms of for some contracts?
Absolutely.
Yes.
It will give you a better rate overall. Basically, we're going to end up charging you about 8% plus $1 extra because it's our direct cost for CRA obligations. Incorporating takes 2.5 hours online and costs about $350, and there's all kinds of tax benefits that your accountant can probably help you out with. If you like the idea of contract work, unless you're only making $20 an hour, and most contracts aren't $20 an hour, it's worthwhile to do. It's easy.
Thanks.
The hardest job would be to pick a company name, I would suggest.
Okay.
Just back to your comment about best practices. I've spent lots of time writing up cover letters and tailoring my resume, and then I apply, and then I don't hear anything back anyway. So I never know. You never get any feedback whether it was good or bad, or I have no idea whether my cover letter was read or it was any good. So that's always, for me, that's always an issue. Because I never, you spend time doing it, and you never know if it was any good or not.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't have an easy answer for that, aside from maybe you didn't pass that 10-second rule with the resume or the cover letter. If it was, us that you were working with, or maybe, yeah, we found somebody a lot quicker because we were speed to market situation where we had 20 minutes or less. We found people. I apologize if we didn't get back to you if it was our organization.
Oh no, well, it was at one case last year. You were about 3 days late from some. Like you were the third person that actually contacted me, and it was a couple of days after the first person.
It's time management on our side as well. I mean, we're just you deal with individuals that have limited time available, and the 10-second rule, it really applies more so on his side, less so on mine, because ours aren't that, permanent placements aren't that time sensitive. So I do have more time to spend on resumes. But if you don't grasp the attention of the recruiter and speak to the needs and message your value, that's probably one of the reasons. But follow up. Don't ever hesitate to follow up on that. And just with regards to the resume, I just wanted to ask that I thought that was very good on best practices. And also addressing what Eugene said with regards to recruiters massaging your resume. We don't. Because your resume is your product, and it's an extension, as Corey said, of your personality and the value that you bring. We do not massage resumes at all. I do add a profile page on top, like my cover page, that I will tell clients why they should see you, why they should invest the time to meet with you. But I don't even correct your spelling mistakes, and do put your resumes through a spell check. I mean, this day and age, there's no reason why you should present a resume with spelling mistakes. I still see testers and QA, which should have a very particular detail orientation, and they have crazy mistakes on their resume.
Yes.
Who will hire you?
Who
will hire you? You're supposed to be that detail-focused bug detector, which you can't even detect in your own resume. Not going to happen.
Can I just respond to that too, just as well? Just on the resume front and stuff, I like what you said, actually, Joel. I think, again, it comes back to being a true representation of you. So if 3 pages works for you versus 2 pages, you have to do what works for you. The thing, though, is a resume better be hard to write. If you write it quickly, it's not good enough. You need to dig deep. It needs to be painful. You need to get frustrated writing it, because the only way you'll come out on the other side where it's solid is if it's been hard work. And that you've gotten input from someone. Talk to people that you know. Get some input. Find out, maybe the resume and the cover letter were perfect. But I honestly believe that the right role will be yours if it's the right role. And so you can write the perfect letter, and you can write the perfect cover letter. And the right role will be there when it's the right time, I believe. But you have to work really hard to get it to the point where you meet that 10-second rule. The other thing to think about, and I don't know about recruiters, I'm just going to speak for HR folk. Any hiring manager, anyone who looks at a resume, every single person sorts it differently. You can get crossed off a list. Your 10-second rule and my 10-second, it's 10 seconds, but you're going to cross out somebody for a different reason than I might. I never read cover letters. Never. I never look at them. She does neither. You do. I don't either.
Same here.
But
And
that's
if cover letter is 1 page long, sorry, I don't have time.
yeah. But that's the point. The point is everybody sorts differently. A spelling error, I will take someone right off the list. If they write Mr. Maydell instead of Corey Maydell, they're off the list. They go to the B pile. They might come back up, but you're doing this. You're looking at all the things that matter to you. If I see somebody that went to the university I went to, I might pull them aside just because. So again, write the resume that's right for you. Follow good practice like they're talking about, but make sure that it's a peer representation of you and work darn hard at it.
And I'm all for customized resumes.
Yeah.
Have one generic, like Joel said, have one generic one, customize your resume as per the role. And you obviously cannot do this. If you apply to 10 different positions online, it's much harder to do that. When you work with a recruiter, my information about the company and what their needs and their hot buttons are, much easier to do that because suddenly I know you can do this stuff and we talked about it, but it's not in your resume, I will tell you. And then you add it because we're partnering there in the process. I'm putting my brand on it. I'm putting my stamp of approval that you have done this and I've checked it. And then, I need to make sure that you present that. So
One more suggestion from kind of hiring manager. If your resume is structured, numbers, bulleted lists, it's easier to grasp, the essence of it. And then I extend this 10 seconds to 1 minute, to 5 minutes, to as long as I need.
Yep, make it easy. Make it easy. We're not very smart. Make it easy for us.
Is there a recruitment company?
Speak louder,
Is there
please.
any recruitment company, the job company where I can take my resume for just strictly review? I'm not coming to you for a job or anything else. Take a look and give me 10 minutes feedback. Is there any place I can go or I have to go network?
I do that all the time. Half of my time spent on educating candidates that I will not place within the next year or two. Because eventually, hopefully, once they're educated and they think the way that I think and I believe my clients think, 2 years, 3 years, 7 years from now, I'll place them. So I spend that time.
As do we. We do that constantly as a value add for consultants.
You have to, because otherwise you wouldn't have enough candidates. We have to do that.
See why we have who we have here today?
But also know that when you get advice, you have to make sure the advice feels right for you.
No, it's in the end, I make the decision, but at least it tells me.
Absolutely.
Right?
No, and most don't do this.
Yeah.
And to Eugene's point, I'm not necessarily a big fan of recruiters either. But it's like anything. There are everybody out there. There's good and not so good. And it's important that you align yourselves with the recruiting firms that will do this kind of stuff because then they're not treating you like you're just a commodity. Even though you're not paying them, ultimately it's you guys that they get to pay for.
Exactly. You're a product.
I'm not paying for it.
No, you can't. We're not allowed to. No, we're not allowed to receive any money from a candidate.
Just a question, maybe the different line of thoughts.
Speak louder, please.
If there's no job posting, you approach recruiters to discuss or get them to
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's exactly what you should do. If you have a particular direction of your career and your plan, you gave some thought after a meeting like this to your career and where you're going and what you like to do and what you're good at, that's when you approach a recruiter, ask for advice, be put on their map of attention and make sure that you get called when that dream job comes to play. Don't go looking for a job when you're unemployed.
Last question for this topic. Go ahead, please.
This is a question about the myths out there. I've heard different myths when you've had to take time out, such as motherhood or moving to a new country, things like that. What's the best practice to address a gap in the resume?
Address it.
Yeah, don't leave it blank for sure. If
Full
you're traveling, that's great. If you took a year off for maternity leave, I would suggest putting that in there.
Would that be in the resume or the cover letter?
In the resume. The cover letter, despite what I said, isn't always read by our clients. If that, we may strip that out altogether. It's the resume that clients will look at despite what we may put on top of that. So often it's passed around to 10, 15 different people at a client site, so resume.
Address it.
So it's in the resume then.
Second.
If there's a gap in your employment, you put that in the resume?
You need to deal with it in your resume somehow.
Yeah.
That's the first time I've ever heard that.
So if you,
Even from recruiters who've looked at my resume.
from a contractor, it's maybe not as important.
It's important because our clients are going to ask that.
Yeah, what did you do?
Why was there
We need to
Well, I know that's been discussed with the recruiter, but it's never been told to put that in the resume. And that's even from a contractor from your company.
Yep.
If I'm looking for, at the resume and I see a gap, that will be the first question. And even if you called for interview, this will be one of the first questions.
You may as well address it up front. It's easier. It just prevents later questioning about it. I've always addressed things like that in my profile that I do, but it makes it easier if you just address it.
Well,
I'm assuming the worst as well.
They've asked me and I've explained it and they've had no problem with that, but it's never been in.
Yeah.
But maybe that's why you were filtered out sometimes.
Because you don't need to be asked. Just give them the information that they need.
Yeah.
Don't give them a reason to filter you out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joel, Corey, your turn.
Cool. So I just wanted to say one thing about the blind resume. So if there isn't a role, I'm just going to say from an HR's perspective, recruiting, they have a different view. If you're a hot commodity and you've sussed out some organizations that you might want to work with, and you're really clear the role that you want, not the one that, well, I can do this, or I can do this, or I can do this, then it's okay to send a resume through to an HR person within an organization. But please be wary. Like, an HR person can get calls from 10 people when they don't have a job opening. They're not going to take your call. But I think it's okay to send your resume through as long as it's really clear. You need to be crystal clear. I can't tell you how many resumes in my career that have gotten that said I can do anything. Well, next. Yeah, I'm not going to figure out for you what job you want. So just be really clear. And just know that HR, just because they don't get back, doesn't mean they don't keep it. But they're getting back if they don't have a role, it's going to be less. So I just wanted to say that. One of the things that organizations do, I think the smart ones anyway, they hire for fit first and then they hire for skill. And what fit means is that your values and your vision and your mission, all those kinds of things align with your organizations. So my question for you is, do you know what your values are? And do you know what a right fit company is for you? Because I interview in my lifetime as an HR practitioner for a long time. One of the questions I often ask candidates is, tell me what your values are. And they often can't tell me. So what's really difficult is you can wind up in the wrong organization only because you yourself didn't make sure that you were the right fit. They're interviewing you to find out if you are, but you need to interview them to find out if they are. Because there's nothing worse than the value proposition not aligning with itself. And it's, you were saying, Joel, and I really agree that the days where programmers could sit in the back corner and just do their thing is changing. They want you part of the nucleus of the organization. They want you going to team events. They want you being a part of things. If that doesn't fit for you, then you need to make sure that you find an organization that does fit for you, so that you're not asked to do something that doesn't fit for you. Fit. Do you know what I mean? Like, tell me right now, how many of you are unemployed in the room? Okay. Out of those that are employed, how many of you are happy? Okay. My point has just been made. There weren't enough hands up in this room. You need to ask yourself, why am I not happy? Anytime there is a disconnect within an organization, from an HR perspective, I always look at the value lineup. Is there a value misalignment? And generally there is. And it could be all kinds of different things, but it's really getting really clear what yours are. And again, making sure that you're interviewing them for that. And the other thing, we talked about a startup earlier. We talked about whether it's, how do you make sure it's the right role? Well, they often haven't spent time thinking about what kind of organization they want to be. So again, if you're coming in and they're not clear and you're not clear, that's where the disconnects occur. That's where the unhappiness can occur. That's where some success falls down because that wasn't done on purpose. That wasn't, the alignment wasn't done on purpose. The other thing is something, I once worked with an organization years ago, and they had this amazing tech team. And they brought in this HR person that maybe didn't understand technology that well, or the tech environment. And they decided that what they wanted to do was cut all the training out. And that in order to be trained in your field, you had to work for a year for them. And then once that year went by, there was all this criteria that you had to enroll in before they would allow you to learn. Now, as an HR folk that has an insight into what you do, that's just crazy. But the challenge was the people that were there were used to a certain way of being. They were used to the fact that training was a gimme. So it may sound like it's a gimme in some organizations, but not in all. So what are the things that are important to you? Managing your own career, you want to make sure you're with an organization that's going to let you learn and grow. So you want to make sure, again, that you're looking at those kinds of things so that you're setting yourself up. The other thing around that is, fit for me just isn't about values. It's also about the whole recruiting process. So the recruiters only do what the employers kind of instruct them to do. So if you're in an interview process and an interview happens, or an interview is scheduled and then it's canceled and it's rescheduled because the hiring manager has to keep changing the time, that might be a flag. How organized are they internally? Do they actually have their acts together internally? Because I can tell you, the recruiting process is just like dating. How they date you, how they court you is going to be an indication of how the wedding is.
Absolutely.
And how long the marriage lasts. So you want to make sure that in that courting stage, you're paying attention to all those things. No matter how badly you want a job, you've all had, you know, that woman or that man that you're like, oh, they're perfect. And all the red flags were flying all over, but you went at it anyway, and it didn't work out. Same
the
thing.
first date, they will most probably present their best. They put their best foot forward, like anybody will do in a first date. The companies and the candidates, best foot forward. So if the red flags are there already, just get out of there.
Because the red flags just become more red flags. Things to think about, it's not only the courting stage, it's that those interviews and are they scheduled. When you walk into the organization, how organized are they? Is there, smaller might be a little messier because they're startups, so give them a little bit of space. But if they're not, you know, is there someone that greets you? Do they meet you on time when you're inside? What kind of questions do they ask? Are they good at asking questions? How do they handle that whole process? It's going to tell you how organized they are. When it comes time for an offer, do they have an employment agreement that is a reasonable one, not a 25-page boilerplate that tells you you can't do anything ever again in your lifetime? You want to make sure that it aligns with the role that you have and what the stage you are in your career. Things like onboarding and orientation. I remember, this is a true story, and I know it still happens today. It's sad but true. I remember walking into an organization. They had hired a programmer. He started, met with the assistant who was kind of doing HR. She said, oh yeah, your desk is over there. No word of a lie. He went and sat down at a desk with no phone, no computer, no nothing. It took 5 days before he got a computer, before he got a phone, before he got logged on, before he could do anything. 5 days. And I just watched because I wanted to see actually how long it would take because I couldn't believe it was actually happening. As an employee, man, those are flags all over the field. I'd run as fast as you could because, again, that's their investment level in you. How much are they investing in you? An example of that for us, just use a JOTA example, and I'm not saying this is the right fit for you, but at JOTA, one of the things that we want people to feel is really welcome. So when an employee starts with us, we actually set up their signature, and we do a selfie with the team, and we say welcome. We put it on their screensaver, so as soon as they sign on, it says hi, welcome. We put a whiteboard, we write some stuff around what they need to know to start. They get a gift when they come. A week later, they get flowers. Because for us, it's important that they feel welcome. That's our culture. That's our system. That doesn't mean that that should be anybody else's. But what is it? What are they doing in that courting stage? And please pay attention to that. Because once you're in and you've got a job, the sad truth in here was the majority of you either don't have jobs or have ones you don't want. Life's way too short. My God, we spend a third of our lives plus earning our living. Go after what it is you want. And I remember years ago, I was doing all those special resumes and I was doing all these special things. I was going to recruiters and I was so sick and tired of looking for a job. I saw this one that it sounded interesting to me. So I, in like 5 minutes, ripped off a cover letter, threw in my resume. It was the best job I ever got. And that wasn't because I did something special. It wasn't because I targeted my keywords. It was just because it was the right one for me. So get really clear, manage your career. Get really clear what you want and go after it. And sometimes we won't get that ideal job the first year. But if you keep going towards what it is you want, you'll make better decisions along the way. Don't compromise that. Don't compromise fit. They're not gonna. The smart ones aren't gonna anyway. If an organization fits you because you've got the skill and not the fit, it's not gonna be a marriage made in anything other than not heaven. So don't find yourself in a role that you don't want or an organization that doesn't fit. I can't tell you that enough. Get really clear what your values are. Ask the organization what theirs are if they don't tell you. And then more importantly, ask them how they actually show up every day at work. So if their value is harmony or bliss or, I don't know, honesty, integrity, whatever it is, ask them to explain how that shows up every day. Do they hold you accountable to it? Because an organization that's got values that they actually honor, everybody in the organization knows what those values are, and they hold you accountable to them. So they hire you to them, they discipline you to them, and they terminate you to them. Because that's about when fit is the right fit. What else can I tell you?
Well, not much.
Are you telling me to shut up, Eugene? And just, again, as you're managing your career, there's different avenues that you can take. I think LinkedIn is a really critical one. If recruiters are using it, you got to know us HR folk are using it because we don't have a 30,000 name database. So go in there, again, represent yourself as you. I can tell you, Joe and we use it all the time. We use LinkedIn all the time. We don't actually go to Craigslist first anymore. We don't go there anymore. We go to LinkedIn first, and only if LinkedIn doesn't work do we go another route. And we're not recruiters. This is when we're recruiting for ourselves or for clients that are for HR. So if you take nothing else from this from me today, is follow your own guidance. Get good input. Understand what works and what doesn't. But in the end, follow what you think you know is right for you. And make sure that you find the right fit for yourself. That will make for a much more harmonious marriage down the road.
Thank you, Corey. Questions? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that that was a really good talk you had there. I'm at that.
Speak louder, please.
I'm at that position at the moment where I'm not really sure if the current job I have is worth it for me. I mean, it was an agency job. They really hard sold me on it. I mean, I was desperate because I came from a very vulnerable position. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of floundering about. I don't really know where I really want to be. There's paths all over the place, but well, I can't really tell which one is what I like.
So, sometimes we find out what we like.
Sorry, Corey. Let me repeat because maybe not everyone heard that. Corey said that you shouldn't fall into just a position. You have to look for the one that fits. But if you are vulnerable and if you need something, if you're desperate, what do? Correct?
And so sometimes, we find what we want by finding out what we don't want. I can tell you, I spent a few years in roles that I had to try to find out that I didn't like them. So sometimes part of our growing and learning as we go through our career is being in roles and we're going, I don't think I like this. But I'll tell you, it's taught you something and you'll be more clear in your next role. But again, go back, look inside and figure out what is it you know. What do you know right now? Is it a small company, a big company, a startup? Find out what you know and have that be your guide. And then keep going from there. But it's not about saying to others, well, what do you think is right for me? What do you think I want? It's what do you want? Nobody knows better than us what we want. But again, part of it is experience is worth, that 20/20 vision. Once we go in and go, okay, this isn't it.
And the fact that you're here is a really good sign.
Yeah.
Network like crazy, meet a lot of people. different companies, different industries. And the more you network, get to know people, that next job is going to come by way of word of mouth.
But network not only when you're in need,
that's it.
But when you are not.
Yeah, because my suggestion though is fit is great. Everybody wants a job that they're happy in. But most of us have to work for a living. We need to earn money in order to pay mortgages, in order to pay for whatever it is that we've got going on. And if you don't have a job, you are extremely vulnerable. And it's really easy to take on a position that's not a fit. My philosophy on that is you have to try it. You've got to first meet your requirements. You've got to first make sure that you've got some money coming in, because it's much easier to find a different position when you are employed than when you are not employed, because you do not come from that position of urgency. So take a position if you have to, and I get it, you've been hard sold, I get it, that it happens, and you make a decision that you're not necessarily happy with, but it was probably the only decision that you had at that point. It may have been, and that's where Corey comes in. Learn from that, use it not as an empty exercise. Learn from that what you don't like, and make sure that you don't make those mistakes again. You're still young. We all make mistakes. Nobody got into the perfect job right out of school. It ain't happening. Very, very, very few of us. So
I was a coffee machine repair person once.
So
no.
I was, and I got electrocuted so many times I thought I should quit. So I mean, we learn and we grow, right? It's true though.
Yeah. But if you need a job and you need to pay your bills, take a job. Don't stay unemployed, because the right fit will come along.
Thank you. There was a question right
yeah,
after.
Just any tips on speeding up the process? Essentially, 7 months ago I was unemployed looking for work, and then 6 months ago I was hired. That went nice and smooth, but I'm still getting calls, from recruiters who basically I just laugh at. They'll call me up and say, hey, basically I can hear at the time, of course, but now I'm hearing from them saying, hey, you sound like a great fit for something we've got. Any chance of, or any tips on speeding that up so that instead of getting these opportunities, 6 months down the track sort of thing, when I get in touch, can I speed that up?
May I speak to it? I mean, we like Corey said, as recruiters, we work based on what our clients need. So 6 months ago, my client may not have needed your particular skill set. Now they do. Now I'm reaching out to you. You should see it as a little bit of a check mark on your profile. So I don't think that there's a negative to that. It is that you're now on the radar screen. Now your skills are prevalent. Now you're being in contact, and you make this.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that, I mean, definitely what you said is 100% true. One thing we're doing, and I think some of our competitors do this as well, is just be proactive with people who resumes. So we try and stay in touch. In our database, it may say you're in a 1-year contract or maybe passively looking in your current position. We'll call you every 6 months or so, even if we're not necessarily looking to fill out a certain role at this moment. Again, treated as flattery because you're on our radar and you're not one of the other 19,000 perhaps who just didn't quite stand out as much as you did.
There is very important aspect of it. Ethical recruiter will never contact their client's employees. So if, for example, I work with Amanda, I can be sure she is not going to call my team members, right? So if you hear from recruiter who placed you in this company, that's a red flag right there. If they are not ethical to people who they work with, they will not be ethical with you.
Yeah, quite a few of our competitors that's now out of business have done quite good business like this, where they place the same guy 2 or 3 times. Like take them in, a year later, take them out, place them elsewhere. And that's why they're not in business anymore. And we've been in business for 30 years, Annex has been in business for, it's all about doing the right thing.
Yeah, there's a whole talk, I think, on unethical processes.
It's very easy to be unethical.
Yeah.
In our business.
Go ahead.
if you've been working at a job for like say 10 years in the same company, but you've switched around your roles within the company, is that necessarily looked at by other companies as, oh, well, why has this person been in this role for 10 plus years? Is that a negative, or do they look at that still as a positive if you market yourself as, I've taken different roles within the company?
No, it's not. Sorry, let me take it. Sure. I am building teams with practically 100% retention. I don't like, if I invest in a person, he becomes my family member. He becomes a family member of this team, and in my team, people, you know, go out for lunch with each other, they go to restaurant on weekends, they, etc., etc. It's a family. So if a person stays longer in this family, he becomes more valuable to me as employer, and more valuable for the team, right? And if companies don't understand that, you will see it right away.
Yeah, but there is a negative to that as well, I have to say, and that is in the tech industry, where it seems as if the perception can be that you do not adjust to change well, that you do sit on your laurels, and you're in a comfort zone. And I do see a lot of, you know, mid-career folks that has 15 years experience and are still working with the technologies they did 5 or 10 years ago. That is a big problem. So you have to provide your recruiter or your HR internally. You have to tell them that you've had these different roles and that was exciting, because if you are looking for a job with a lot of challenge and a lot of excitement, and that's what you kind of want, you've got to say why you stayed for 10 years and why they looked after your career needs for 10 years. Because in the tech environment, we don't see that a lot.
So where do you do that? Do you address
the
that in your cover letter?
You need to get the attention of the person that's reading it. So you have to have your resume. I very often see people with you know, IBM, but they are this role with these achievements, this role with those achievements, and immediately, this is not a one-trick pony or whatever what's the saying? One-trick pony. There's just one thing and one thing that they can do good, and they will not fit in any other environment, because it does get frowned on if you're 10 years in one company.
So just make sure that you bullet it out in your resume and then address it in your cover letter.
If you have 10 different jobs in one company, it's like having 10 different careers.
Absolutely.
It can be, the other thing to keep in mind though is, again, if you're with a company for too long, you've got narrow experience.
Yes.
So if you've been with 5 different organizations, and again, it's a balance, right? I'm not saying change jobs every year either.
No.
It's a balance. It's making sure though that you've got rounded enough experience. If I'm looking at it, I'm going to say, wow, they've been there for 20 years.
Yeah.
They're probably narrow in their thinking.
You know, you just all reinforced why I'm not a big fan of recruiters.
Loyalty is great. Loyalty is something that a company should earn, and not just be given based on that's the job. I mean, if the company does not meet your career needs, make a change. There's no reason why you should stay. And that's the thing, that if you don't address that every couple of years, your needs, what do you need out of this company? If they need it, it will probably be a role change or a responsibility change. If that doesn't happen, you do the same thing that you did 10 years ago, that's for me a red flag.
I guess where we need is at the following point. Don't quit just because you think you have this resume in this company for too long. This is just wrong reason. Okay, go ahead.
What I address if the job title never changed, right?
What, sorry?
Job title never changed, but if you look at the experience and the work profile, that's totally different.
But in technology, that'll be products.
Yes.
So you will work with different products and different technologies. Tell me about it. Don't keep it a secret. Don't let me
stick them in the resume as bullets?
Yeah.
Accomplishments, teams, I mean, you've had different teams over the years, most likely, dynamics change. Yeah, highlight those things instead. There's different ways of spinning it that make, you know, that do emphasize really all the good things you've done over the years.
And you said it well, Joel, when he gave you that example of what the blah, blah, blah part of the resume that one person wrote, you want to be really specific about what you achieved. Both of them talked about that, and it's really important. Tell me what you did. Don't tell me you're a good team player. What the heck does that mean? What did you do that says you are one? So the bullets, what are all the different projects you worked on, and what was the result?
So do I still need to summary up on the top, or can I take it to the bottom and put my actual stuff right up with experience on the top? Because I've been told, put your summary up, that's where you want to look for first 35 seconds, and then go the rest of the graph.
Well, good practice on summary can be 10 years experience with .NET development, 5 years with Microsoft SQL Server. Largest database was 250 tables. That's kind of a really quick synopsis of 5 points from us.
But not a big paragraph of, essay format. Shouldn't be in a summary.
And then detail it. So you've got the 10 years caught my attention. Now let's go through all the different roles you had that comprise 10 years of experience.
And may I address just one point that that gentleman mentioned with regard to the gaps in your resumes? Vancouver is a very small tech community. I still come across people that leave out employers because it wasn't a good experience. Don't do that. It can cost you your job. I have had one candidate who applied to the client themselves. It wasn't through me. They didn't verify all their employers. They didn't have it on their resume. They signed in their agreement that all the information they shared was true and valid, everything else. Somebody knew him, recognized him. Oh, you worked for us and this happened. He got fired. So make sure that you do disclose your employment history, even if it was not comfortable. Share the reasons and make sure that you're upfront about it, full disclosure. If you hesitate, share it. That's just my basic principle.
You just have to massage how you say it.
Sure. Again, with the messaging. Sure.
Great. Well, any other questions? Okay, let's open. Well, I just want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to ask questions. If no other questions, then go ahead.
If somebody was let go by a company, do they actually have to say that by law? Like, if the company says, why did you leave the company? Do you actually have to say that because I was laid off? Or, and if so, when they're calling for a reference back to the company, are they legally obliged to tell that you were let go because of a downsizing?
Legal? I'm not a lawyer. Please do that.
So I'm not a lawyer either. And there isn't any legal, to my knowledge, as I'm not a lawyer, from an HR perspective, there isn't any law out there that says that that you have to say that it was because of downsizing. References were actually first came in place in like 1854 or something. And the whole idea was the ability to say to your countrymen that, hey, here's somebody really good that we want to move on and maybe you can get them a job. References today, I think, have become a little bit watered down. It's a little bit more difficult because of the liability issues on both sides. So I think that, you don't have to write on your resume, I got fired. It's really just how you message it when you're having a conversation. It wasn't a good fit. Everybody knows that sometimes organizations aren't the right fit for you. And so if you got, let's say you got fired, the chances are it's just that it wasn't a good fit for you. So you'd say, listen, you know what, we ended, it was amicable, it wasn't a good fit for me. So, think about what's the truth behind it without having to say I got fired.
And the reason I ask is because, I know a lot of people in different companies do get let go because of downsizing. It's not that they're fired because they weren't a good employee, but then the next employer might look at it as, oh, you were probably fired. So
no, we're Vancouver. Most of the techies that I work with has been laid off at some point in their time, and several times, 3, 4, 5 times. And yes, you do get kind of, the same idea from, you get a perception like the guy that's been divorced for 3 or 4 times. The problem's not necessarily the woman, but with the guy. That you think that the candidate is the problem, that being laid off. But most of the prominent recruiters will know the history of those companies as well. They will know that the reasons why they went through a financial breakdown and why they laid off. So layoff is not a problem.
That's a flip side of Vancouver being huge with startups and small.
We're used to it. And most of our CEOs are too. Just keep in mind with regards to the reason, if you did get fired because you did something, your CEO will probably check with, and talk to other CEOs, etc. So make sure that the stories, that there's enough truth in it, that it's actually, kind of verifiable to some degree. Forget about the references, because it's probably the legal aspect of it or not, but they do have social chats. We've got a lot of networking opportunities in town for those startup CEOs, and they do talk to each other quite
I can say that quite often I see companies in the resume that I know, and I will definitely call.
Yeah. Yeah. So disclosure, that's it.
There's a separation on LinkedIn, so if somebody was really after you as a candidate, they wanted to verify it. Yeah, the references only go so far. They're going to probably check your second or third degree LinkedIn connections, and just to see if they don't know somebody, chances are they will know someone. Vancouver is incredibly small that way.
Yeah.
How does that work internationally then? So, I mean, for instance, I didn't grow up here, I didn't study here. A lot of my past history is not from employers and things that are here. Mm-hmm. So therefore, a lot of, when I pass over my CV, it's just, I believe, too hard. A lot of, recruiters, a lot of employers looking at it and going, I don't know the background.
Sure, it's an unknown.
Yeah.
When there's an unknown, there's always a risk. We try to mitigate that risk by reference checking and talking to the candidate and everything that we can. And most companies, probably yours, especially on the crown corporations, will have back check, where they actually will go and have a process where they hire a company to go and check whether you've got your degree at the university you got internationally. So it's all verified information.
There's one downside as well to Vancouver is that unfortunately we're a very fickle town. Getting that first role in Vancouver seems to be incredibly difficult. We've had some amazing resumes, amazing candidates from the US, and we took a year to get them work because for whatever reason, a lot of the larger organizations, I don't see BC Hydro or ICBC on this resume or whatever. I'm not that keen on employing that individual or taking a chance.
I think it's perception, cultural fit.
Is there something that I can do personally to help explain that? Or
yeah, I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier, coming in, talking to the recruiter or whoever you may know, network a lot. If we can stand by you and say, listen, client, this guy he's amazing. I know he hasn't got any BC experience, he's got a great sense of humor, they're going to love his Aussie accent or whatever it may be. Give him a chance, we'll stand by it. We're putting ourselves out there a little bit, but because we got to know you a little bit, we may take that chance.
I just placed a guy, it's a guy from the UK. He landed in Vancouver in October last year. Couldn't find a job. He's got great experience. Big gaming companies, project program managers, offshore resources. He had it all. Nobody wanted to hire him. I had one conversation with him because he went to the trouble to actually come in and meet with me. We had a conversation. And I sent him out to one of my clients and said, you have to meet this guy. They hired him. 24 hours later, he had an offer in hand.
That's awesome.
And it happens. But it's your responsibility to make sure that you're, seen as the candidate that we cannot, get by without.
And that whole dating game thing we talked about a bit earlier, don't underestimate the importance you have to have around passion for that opportunity. They're going to question you about what you know about them as an organization. Don't walk in there and not know anything about their core values or why you want to work there. Come prepared to in 1 minute or less, have an eloquent statement as to why I want to work with you. Have tears coming out of their eyes because they want you to work so badly for that organization.
Every company has a website. I just do not understand how candidates can go for an interview, whether you go through a recruiter or on your own, and have no idea what that company does. That is, to me, I cannot even think that. Because if that is as much attention that you're putting into the company, that company shouldn't hire you because you've got no idea who you are, what you want, etc. Pay attention.
Yeah, this is very, very important. And since we are talking about interview process, there is another thing that is very important that I see a lot as a hiring manager in candidates. Stick there. Don't give up. On Friday I made an offer and got it signed back for a junior developer position. And I was looking at I interviewed maybe 30 people. Many of them were recent grads or people with 1-2 years of experience. Well, I expected that they don't know anything. Well, come on, of course not. But we would give them a keyboard and a mouse and give them a task, and if they need to go Google it, fine. I know you don't know anything. I want to see how you learn. When we hire sysadmins, we give them keyboard and a mouse, and give them access to a broken server. You go figure what's broken in this server, you fix it, and then you do a task that we give you. It takes hours, sometimes 6 hours. But you either stick there or you give up. That's important.
So something that Eugene's talking about, the woman was asking about how do you stand apart, how do you stand out. So think about that. Think about that. Let's assume for a moment you got an interview, whether it came for a recruiter or you did it on your own. What is it that you could bring to that interview based on what you know about them because you've done your research? You've looked at their website, you've looked at LinkedIn. You might even see that you might know somebody who knows somebody that can give you some intel. What could you bring? So maybe you bring something, maybe you bring a video where you shot yourself just fixing a server yesterday because that's what you thought they'd want to see. I don't know. But think about what is it that you can bring in that says, hey, I'm committed to this. I've done my research. I know who you are and I know what you need, and here's why I'm the right job, the right person for the job. We call them inbox exercises, is one of the tools we use. So it's simulating something that you would do on a day-to-day basis. So think about that. What's an inbox? What would you be doing and how can you showcase that you can do it? Certainly better than the other candidates. So think about that. How do you stand out?
Okay, other questions? Go ahead.
I just wanted to talk about Amanda's suggestion of disclosing everything about your work history. I've had some dilemma about that because my dad, he works at the aerospace industry here in Lower Mainland. He's a hiring manager as well, and he suggests the contrary. He suggests to hide parts of my work history. He thinks
big company, he works for a big company, correct? MBA.
He does.
Yeah, it's easier to get away with that. Small companies, you just don't. I've just seen, there's to me no downside to it, to adding it. And you may just have one sentence, and that's okay. I don't know whether my colleagues differ from me, but I've just seen too much negative associated.
You know, I don't know the rules in that industry, but
yeah.
Don't do it in IT.
And it may be, I mean, it's different if you present your resume as a summarized version. But if you give it as a resume, and this is your job, you know, logistically, and it's not in there, and somebody finds out that it is, there's a problem.
If it's 2 weeks, you know, maybe a month, no problem, but...
And contracting, you can say, I've been contracting or consulting. There's ways to position it.
It was a 6-month term, so it could be...
That's different. It's term. It's definable.
I think so much of it too is what's hard for us is we're up here saying, here's what we think. What we can't do is sit down and show you how to do it. And I think what's critical is that whatever you write, you feel comfortable with. Yeah. But you don't want to give me a reason to put your resume aside in that first 10 seconds. So if there's blanks that I go, oh God, I wonder why, oh, it's too much, I'll put in to B. You know, and I'll go back to another list and start with my A. Or however we sort, whatever it is. But I think, I agree, I think the more you can put on there, the better it is. But again, it's how you position it. It's how it's worded, it's how it's said, it's how it's laid out. Because you can put anything in there, but you want to put your best foot forward. So if you're not sure how to do it, then get some advice. But here's the thing, we're saying do it one way, Dad's saying do it another way. You got to figure out what way's right for you.
Of course.
Yep.
There's a risk in both cases. It's weighing the balance. How bad is your discretion?
Absolutely. That's in the end, it's your decision. What risk do you want to take?
Okay. Are we running out of questions? No more questions? Okay. 1 minute. I don't see questions.
Oh.
1 minute. Is there a question or not? Sorry. Okay. So 1 minute each.
Oh.
To finish.
Oh, I think I've said enough. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm that talks a lot. So you know, just do what you need to do in order to get yourself positioned right. Take responsibility for your career. Stop blaming others. Stop giving the market they give excuses for not meeting your career goals. Take responsibility. Plan it. Meet with the right people to get you there, get advice, make it right, make it work for you. You should be in a position that you're happy in, full stop.
I'll come out from a recruitment company perspective. There's all kinds of choices out there. I would never for a moment suggest working with only one organization. Shop around a little bit. I mean, personally, we're pretty confident that we'll be among the ones you want to work with. The kind of questions to ask about, we've kind of covered here already, but I'll summarize them briefly. Disclosure of bill rate and pay rate, so you know you're not being squeezed or that your client's going to get overcharged and therefore you're not going to get a sniff when it comes to your submission. Confirmation that you're going to be presented. If you're being double submitted or presented without your consent, I wouldn't work with that organization again, because that should never be a case where you're just put forward through an opportunity. Pre-qualified vendor list. This is one we touched a little bit. Ask them how many of the local pre-qualified vendors they work with. If they say all of them, okay, then you've got a chance to work with many different clients. If only a few, you're going to be missing out on quite a few opportunities that other competitors may be privy to that you don't have access to. In-person interviews, you have that right, you have that expectation, I would hope. Be somebody in person to put a face to a name, and expect nothing less, because the social skills, the cultural fit are so important with our clients, even on short-term contracts. Number one reason people don't get a role after they've interviewed, aside from maybe some technical skills missing, is not a cultural fit. What does that mean? You didn't do the research on the organization, you didn't show passion necessarily for the role. Even for short-term contracts, they want to see that passion come through, so that in-person interview helps us assess whether or not a certain company, even a short-term contract, would be a good fit for you.
On the recruiting, I'm going to come from HR, but really quick on the recruiting side, is if the recruiter doesn't want to meet with you, it's all about volume and they don't actually care, and they're just going to get you a job, not the right one. So that would be my 2 cents. On the other side of things, from an HR perspective, if you're not going through your recruiting, you're coming through me, you better have your acts together. You better have really good resumes, you better have worked really hard and deep, and made sure it's really clear how good you are. Because you've done some amazing things, I'm sure you better showcase those. And you better do it in a way that I can read it really quickly to say, wow, I can go from 10 seconds to 1 minute to 5 minutes, because I want to learn more. And if I decide to call you in for an interview, you better be on time and you better dress for the part. We actually had a client who's a well-known individual that works out of West Vancouver. We interviewed this woman. She went to meet with our client. It's an HR, not a recruiting thing. And the woman showed up with Uggs, jeans, and a t-shirt. Well, she wasn't even interviewed. She didn't even want to interview her. So again, dress for the part, dress for where you're going. Make sure that you're representing yourself well, because it's first impressions. That dating thing again. They're looking at you, you're looking at them. What kind of first impression do you want to make? A marriage made in heaven is one that starts with all the honesty and stuff up front, where you put your best foot forward.
Even a casual company, wear a shirt and tie for the interview. Don't assume that they're going to want you wearing Dockers and an open shirt. Just that one time wear the shirt and tie. If you're overdressed, they'll tell you.
You better be over than under.
Yep, over is better than under.
Okay, I would like to thank our panelists.